Good morning and a very Merry Christmas. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Now, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged his war-battered nation to come together and try to celebrate Christmas, even though the holiday will have a bitter taste, he says, this year. For the first time, Ukraine's Orthodox Church is allowing worshippers to congregate today rather than on the 7th of January, in a widening shift from the Russian Church. But, of course, many Ukrainians will spend the day in cold and darkness because of Russian missile attacks on power and water infrastructure. President Zelensky joins religious leaders, including the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Pope, in using Christmas messages to denounce the war.
Unfortunately, this year, all holidays have a bitter taste for us, and we can feel the traditional spirit of Christmas differently. Dinner at the family table may not be so tasty and warm. There may be empty chairs around it. And our homes and streets may not be so bright. And Christmas bells may not sound so loud and inspiring because of air raid sirens or, even worse, shots and explosions. And all this together can pose a great threat. This is despair in higher forces and their power, in goodness and justice in the world. Loss of hope, loss of love, loss of self.
Correspondent Saba Chowdhury is here with more on a powerful message there, Saba, from President Zelensky.
Yes, good morning, Dermot. Absolutely. In a rather poignant message there to the people of Ukraine, President Zelensky talks about how different this Christmas will be for the people of Ukraine this year. He spoke about how around the dinner table, for example, certain loved ones will not be there, how food will taste different. He meant it in an emotional sense, but also actually in a physical sense as well, because the same access to food is just not there that it was, for example, say, a year ago. And also the fact that this is all happening in the backdrop of no heat, of no water in certain cities across the country. And that's because of constant Russian attacks in terms of missiles and drones. Now, something that is quite interesting is the timing of this message. And that's because typically Ukrainians celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. Now, this is according to the Julian calendar, which is different to what we follow in the West, which is the Gregorian calendar. And the reason why this is quite interesting is because it's a separation from the Russian Orthodox Church, which also, like the Ukrainians, celebrates typically Christmas on the 7th of January. But this year, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has said that it gives people permission to celebrate Christmas on the 25th if people so wish. And the reason for that, again, as I say, is to separate itself from how Russians do things in a move closer to the West. Now, the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, he has previously said that Russians that are killed in the war will have their sins forgiven and cleared, essentially, by God. He's an avid supporter of Putin. And, of course, this is something that the Ukrainians are now saying we want to separate ourselves from.
And tell us about religious leaders and their messages also mentioning the war in actual fact.
Absolutely. So we've also heard from Pope Francis. He delivered an address in the Vatican and St. Peter's Basilica to around 7,000 people, in which he spoke about the impact that things like war have on children. He talks about the forgotten children and how when certain injustices are carried out in the world, it's often young people who are left behind. And he also calls for more empathy from the people. We have a clip here of him talking.
This Christmas too, as in the case of Jesus, a world ravenous for money, power and pleasure does not make room for the little ones, for so many unborn, poor and forgotten children. I think above all of the children devoured by war, poverty and injustice. Yet those are the very places to which Jesus comes, a child in the manger of rejection and refusal. In him, the child of Bethlehem, every child is present. And we ourselves are invited to view life, politics and history through the eyes of children.
So also talking about war is the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. He talks about how in the UK, and generally speaking, War is something that affects everyone. The world often forgets injustice, but the person or being, he says, that does not is God. He says if God forgets, if the war forgets, the world forgets injustice, God does not. And he also talks about some of the issues that we face domestically, the cost of living crisis, people working in the National Health Service, those in hospital beds, and also there's a touching tribute in there we will see later at 11 o'clock to the Queen. This is, of course, the country's first Christmas without her.
It is indeed. OK, Saba, thank you very much indeed. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
Now then, also this morning, a murder investigation is underway after a woman was shot and killed late on Christmas Eve at a pub in a Merseyside village. She died from her injuries in hospital after the shooting at the Lighthouse Inn in Wallasey Village. 3 men also suffered gunshot wounds and a number of other people are said to be injured. Police say they believe the gunman left the pub car park in a dark-coloured vehicle, possibly a Mercedes, they say. OK, let's take a look now at how Christmas is being celebrated and has been celebrated around the world. Starting with the biblical town, of course, of Bethlehem, marking the beginning of Christmas Day with midnight mass. The Church of Nativity, where the mass was held, sits on the spot where Christians believe that Jesus was born. Worshippers gathered in the Immaculate Church near Mosul in Iraq to celebrate Christmas Eve Mass. They crowded around a bonfire in front of the church and sang hymns inside. Karakosh is known as the Christian capital of Iraq, though the Christian population has, of course, dwindled considerably over the last decades. Well, in Australia, the faithful have attended Mass at services including St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney and St Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne, but many others preferred, of course, to be outdoors, taking advantage of Christmas in the summer. Sydney's beaches, including Bondi, have been full of families enjoying the sun, some of them naturally in Santa hats. And from the White House, a picture of President Joe Biden and the First Lady decorating their Christmas tree. They leave it late. It was tweeted with the caption, "Just a few finishing touches. Hope you and your loved ones are having a great Christmas Eve." Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have responded to the controversial newspaper column by Jeremy Clarkson, dismissing the Sun's apology as nothing more than a PR stunt. In the column published last week, Jeremy Clarkson wrote that he hates Meghan on a cellular level and that he dreams of her being shamed naked in the street. He tweeted his regret after the column broke complaints records with the independent press standards organisation IPSO. The Sun issued an apology late yesterday. Well, in a statement released in response, a spokeswoman for the Sussexes said the fact that the Sun has not contacted the Duchess of Sussex to apologise shows their intent. This is nothing more, they say, than a PR stunt. A true apology would be a shift in their coverage and ethical standards for all. Unfortunately, we're not holding our breath. And staying with the royal family, the King will give his first Christmas Day message later, the second time he's addressed the country after the death of his mother. The Queen delivered every televised Christmas speech since the inaugural broadcast in 1957. So, how might her son's message differ? Well, Sky's royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills looks at what might be expected.
The royal family, like most of us, have their Christmas traditions. The Princess of Wales hosting a carol service at Westminster Abbey is quickly becoming one of them. But this year there will be something distinctly different for all of us. For 70 years, it was the Queen who spoke to us all on Christmas Day, always in her own words, often referring to her own personal Christian faith. Now her son, for the first time, will address the nation and the Commonwealth. In recent weeks, he has already joined in with the religious festivities, with visits celebrating diversity, maybe giving us a flavour of the kind of message he'll want to get across. Archbishop Angelos will be watching. He's seen firsthand on recent engagements how he's settling in as king.
The king's language of, blessing and Merry Christmas and appreciation for the work of Christian communities and faith communities in the world and the community at difficult times, it's all an indication that he's not shying away from faith. And, I'm confident that we will all be pleasantly satisfied.
One thing that will be the same is the royals again heading to Sandringham with the King and Queen Consort, this time playing host. For a couple of years they couldn't come here because of COVID, and you can see why the Queen would have missed being here at Christmas, but also why the King has now decided that for this festive period the family should be back here in Norfolk. After what has been a difficult few months at times, they can completely get away from it all here. Except on Christmas morning, of course, when they open those gates for just a couple of hours and let the crowds in. So I remember that Christmas morning so well, and you coming up to me and saying, I've got this great photo. You can see from her photos, and yes, that one did make all of the newspapers, that Karen Anvil is one of those dedicated locals who turn up, some as early as 5 a.m.
I think it's going to be mixed emotions, if I'm being totally honest with you. I think people are on board with the royal family, supportive of this new royal family moving forwards, as all coming together. It has been a difficult few years for lots of reasons, but we're just so glad that there's going to be normality. Do you know what I mean? They're back, and we want them back.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
With this and claims of racism at a Buckingham Palace event, the run-up to Christmas has seen some serious questions for the institution. And for a king who, more than anything, wants to show us what he's really like, what he cares about, and knows with this first Christmas message he has a much-loved and respected act to follow. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
And of course, you can watch the King's first Christmas message right here on Sky News at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now, also making the news this morning, Pele's daughter has shared a photograph on Instagram of the family who are spending Christmas Day in hospital after the Brazilian footballer's cancer progressed. A medical report earlier this week showed that the 82-year-old now needed care for cardiac and renal dysfunction, having been treated for cancer for more than a year. OK, let's get a bit more now on Christmas celebrations around the world. We're going to the Middle East now. I'm joined by the Archbishop of Jerusalem, Archbishop Hossam, and a very Merry Christmas to you, Archbishop. Tell us, first of all, I know what a busy day it is for you, so really big thanks to you for taking the time to speak to us. How do you celebrate Christmas in the cathedral?
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you and to all our viewers this morning, and greetings from Jerusalem, from the city of Bethlehem. And it is wonderful to be with you today on this wonderful morning. The cathedral will celebrate this morning the Mass for the local congregation and also some pilgrims. But last night we spent most of the day and the night, in Bethlehem, in the Shepherd's Field, in the Church of the Nativity, and then we ended the evening with a midnight Mass here in Jerusalem.
It must be a very special atmosphere in Bethlehem. You mentioned there the pilgrims. Of course, they haven't been able to come for a few years. Are there many of them there this year?
Yes, there are quite a few pilgrims, not as we used to have before, but the numbers are picking up and pilgrims are returning to the land of the Holy One. And we've seen kind of a pickup in the pilgrimage industry and tourism.
Tell us a bit, people will be interested to know about your diocese. Of course, we know what a difficult, to say the least, part of the world it is. Tell me about the Anglican community in your diocese.
Yeah, so the Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem extends into 5 countries, including Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. We have about 35 institutions between schools and clinics and hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And we have 28 congregations scattered throughout that region. And the Diocese of Jerusalem is quite vibrant and very active church in the Holy Land, and especially it is known for its social and humanitarian ministry within the Diocese of Jerusalem. Of course, in addition to the pastoral care for our own people and the witnessing of the living Lord.
And tell me about some of the pressures. The Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, has been talking about the pressures on Christians in your region. How much have numbers dwindled over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. The Christian presence, unfortunately, has been on the decline. The exodus of Christians from the Holy Land is a huge concern for the church leaders, and not only in the Holy Land, but throughout the Middle East, but particularly in Jerusalem itself and the Holy Land at large. We are less now than 2% of the total population. Comparing it like 100 years ago, we were 27% of the population. Jerusalem alone today is about 6,000 Christians, whereas 100 years ago, we were close to 30,000 Christians. So it's really a great concern for us to see these numbers dwindling, and especially in this land where Christianity began, where Christ was born, raised, died, and rose again.
And tell me about the political situation. Of course, the world is following the return once again in Israel of Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister, I think for the 6th time. But the coalition that he's put together, does that concern you? It involves the far right, of course.
Yeah, I think, like we as Christians and of course, and I'm sure that, we speak for quite a good number here in the Holy Land and across the world, for people who find moderation as the way forward, and the inclusion and embrace and accepting the other. So having a right-wing government is a bit concern for our communities, and especially, the rise of some, like tendencies within the government for more exclusive, more segregation, and more, I would say, kind of, I don't know if some people kind of expecting some enmity and hatred on part of some of the extremists within the government. I hope and that this government will bring stability, and this is our wish, but I think people are more on the pessimistic side of things. So we will see what this government holds for the Holy Land, but we have just to wait and see what's going to happen.
Well, Archbishop, we've been talking there, haven't we, about some of the difficulties. Let's, I'm afraid we're nearly out of time. Let's end the interview with your message of hope for this Christmas Day.
Yeah, indeed. I would just kind of say, like, people ask us, like, are we optimistic in the Holy Land? And we say that we are hopeful. We as Christians are hopeful for a bright future for this land, for peace and justice, for all people, for security for Israel, as well as self-determination for the Palestinian two-state solution, that people can live in peace and harmony with each other, and Bethlehem and Jerusalem will continue to be a beacon for peace, light, and life.
Well, the message from the cradle of Christianity there by the Archbishop of Jerusalem. Archbishop Hossam, very good talking to you. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas to you. Thank you.
Now, for millions of Americans, festive cheer is being tempered by a huge winter storm that meteorologists are calling a bomb cyclone. At least 28 people have died in the storm that stretched from about 2,000 miles from the Great Lakes in the north all the way down to the border with Mexico. Temperatures in some places have dropped as low as -45, and blizzards are causing some blackouts. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports.
This is what a so-called bomb cyclone looks like in time-lapse. Its timing could scarcely have been worse. As America mobilises in the run-up to Christmas, Arctic conditions are blowing through the country. More than 200 million people are subject to some form of weather warning.
The conditions, the blinding snow, the zero visibility, absolute whiteouts, it may go down as one of the worst in history.
Thousands of flights have been cancelled. Planes that have taken to the air have had to negotiate stormy conditions. The winds, heavy snow and flooding have stalled travel by land too. This was part of a road washed away in May. And this was the scene on the Ohio Turnpike, where several people died after 50 vehicles were involved in a collision. One Ohio sheriff ventured onto Twitter to post a health warning on venturing outside.
We got several areas that are still impassable, stay home, let the plow crews get their stuff done. Deputies worked through the night with zero visibility and darkness, which made things worse.
These conditions are causing problems with power. Tens of millions of people are without it as the bomb cyclone barrels through. Would-be immigrants stuck on the southern border are experiencing temperatures rarely witnessed there. In the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., members of the public have joined charities in providing food and clothing to homeless people.
They need help, all the help they can get. This is no joke, and this happening everywhere. These people, they still human.
So-called hypothermia shelters have been opened here. Around the country, too, libraries and police stations are doubling as warming centres, as authorities scramble to find emergency accommodation.
If you don't expose yourself to the elements beyond what you can tolerate, you get in a sleeping bag or under the many blankets they give away in this park or under a pile of clothes. But you got to know your limits.
I know we're down in the teens, but I'm not looking forward to sub-zero.
Why?
I value my life.
In these bitterly cold temperatures, there is concern across the board. In places with power outages, and there are many of them, people with roofs over their head are being advised to seek shelter, not to assume that without a heat source, they will get through the night. In Maine, trees felled by the Christmas storms forced onto the road a flock of turkeys. What else? What next is the question here, from extreme weather that has brought extreme challenges. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
Well, now, many of us are, of course, lucky enough to be sharing today with family, friends and loved ones. But for our armed forces personnel deployed abroad, it is, of course, another Christmas away from loved ones. Well, Coldstream Guard Major Danny Morell and Corporal Colin Henry are both deployed in Somalia, from where they join me now in a very, very Merry Christmas to you both, gentlemen. And first of all, give us, if you would, Major Morell, an overview of just how different Christmas is in somewhere like Somalia. A lot hotter for a start, I'm sure.
Yes, it's about 35 degrees in the shade with about 80% humidity. So it's the weather's a little bit different from what you've been experiencing in the UK over the last couple of weeks.
So how do you celebrate Christmas? I mean, I presume it is just, it's another day on duty with, a nice lunch.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much business as usual. We try to get most of the work done in the morning so we can all enjoy a nice Christmas lunch this afternoon, and then maybe watch a Christmas film and definitely watch the King's speech later on.
We'll get on to that in a moment or two. But Colin, tell us, I know you're away from your family, from your wife and your son. How much contact are you able to have?
We're quite lucky out here that there's quite a stable internet connection, so I can make a phone call every day or twice a day, and I get to see what he's doing at school and what the wife's up to and stuff like that. So luckily out here it's pretty good.
Do you want to say hello to him? How old is he?
He's 4.
And what's his name?
He's called Killian. He'll be busy in his presence right now. So, hi Killian, if you can see me.
And is your present there as well? You make sure that's all sorted out before you go.
A lot of it was left to the wife, to be fair, but that's no different to if I was at home anyway.
And tell us then about the Christmas dinner. You mentioned 35 degrees there, Major Morell. Does turkey and Christmas pud kind of feel right, or you go ahead anyway?
Well, I think this time of year, turkey and Christmas pudding always feels right, no matter where you are.
And then you mention it's going to be weird, isn't it? It's going to be weird for all of us, but I suppose particularly for you as Coldstream Guards, your Colonel-in-Chief is, of course, the King, and that Christmas message, you all gather for that.
Yes, well, I mean, it's a special time of year, no matter where you happen to be serving. And, this year will be special, it being the first King's speech. We'll all sit down together, all of us that are serving currently in Mogadishu, and we'll look forward to listening to the King.
Were you involved? I mean, of course, the Coldstream Guards were majorly involved in the death and the funeral, of course, of Her Majesty the Queen. What was your involvement personally, Major Morrell?
Well, you know, it was a particularly proud moment to be to take part in the vigil and the laying in state. Extremely sad, as it was for everybody across the nation, but immensely proud to be personally involved.
Yeah, as we all were of you. And Corporal Henry, just tell us a bit. I mean, a lot of people are going to be surprised that we're talking to British forces in Somalia. Tell us a bit, what you can, of course, about the mission.
So we're mainly here to help stabilise Somalia, so it doesn't become a foothold for terrorist groups such as Al-Shabaab, and to help the Somalian army stabilise itself.
Right, and so that involves what, training and support?
Yeah, training, mentoring, support where we can, yeah.
And what's morale like then, Colonel Morrell, on a day like this? Because, of course, you know, separated, as we're discussing, from your families, but doing such an important job.
Dermot, thank you very much for the promotion. But, yeah, I mean, it's difficult being away from family at this time of year. But it's, you know, we're all comrades. We all, you know, as do thousands of service people, you know, all over the world, you know, make this selfless commitment to join our services. But, you know, we're all in this together. We come from various different regiments and units, and it's, you know, it's nice to make new comrades and friends and to spare or to share Christmas Day.
Exactly. Well, it can't be long, Major Morrell. and Colin, I mean, this isn't your first time away from your family, is it, as a serving soldier?
No, a few years ago I served in the Falklands on Project Anemoy, which meant a Christmas deployment. Again, the Falklands gets hot at Christmas time over there, so again, another warm one. But yeah, second one, hopefully my last one away at Christmas.
Well, indeed. And when do you get back? Do you know when you're getting back to see Killian and the family?
I get somewhere in hopefully at the back end of February, March time, so I can see my daughter for her birthday, and then probably finish tour at back end of May. OK,
we can have second Christmas then. That'd be glad to see you both. Really good talking to you. Thank you very, very much indeed. And the appreciation of the nation. And Merry Christmas to you both.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Well, now, the National Trust says that even though there's an energy crisis, net zero targets are more relevant than ever. The Trust's invested millions of pounds in its own green energy supply and towards modernising historical heating systems in its buildings. It's calling for climate-friendly pledges not to be lost. Caterina Vitozzi reports.
Imagine heating a house like this. Speke Hall in Liverpool is nearly 500 years old. Inside, its Victorian heating system was expensive and difficult to control. So the National Trust, which runs the estate, took a leap, installing a ground source heat pump in a centuries-old property.
This is in the cellar of the dairy courtyard, and this is what we call a plant room, and this is where all the heart of the ground source heat pump works. This is where all the heat drawn from the field is brought into. Originally, the house was heated by liquid petroleum gas boiler. Well, that's all gone, so we're fossil fuel free, and this is far more efficient in terms of our carbon footprint, as well as our reduction in fossil fuels.
The National Trust's net zero target is 2030. The government's is 20 years later. Both say heat pumps have a role in decarbonisation. Speke Hall shows they are not just for new builds.
We have a duty of care to look after this special place forever. So with our ability to control the levels of heat and humidity in a way we've never done before, is just one less pressure on looking after this special place.
But in a cost of living crisis, net zero feels for some not now. That's why reducing consumption is an important first step, as applicable in a mansion house as somewhere smaller.
The key thing, it doesn't really matter what size the property is or what the activity. The key thing is to try and reduce the amount of energy that you're using in the first place. At home, in my house, I'll be doing exactly the same thing, checking I've got that loft insulation. Have I got double glazing? Can I even just draw the curtains to, in the evening, make sure we're trying to keep as much heat inside as possible? And then where are you getting your heat from? And can you get that from a more sustainable way.
Tradition meets technology. For a net zero future, both must work together. Katerina Potocki, Sky News in Liverpool.
Now, the big question of the day, like 'em or loathe them, Brussels sprouts are guaranteed to provoke the age-old debate around that Christmas table. But regardless of your preference, the UK remains the biggest global importer of the sprouts. Well, now rising fuel prices and a heatwave could change that. Appropriately enough, then, we sent our Brussels correspondent, get it, Adam Parsons, to the epicentre of sprout production. It's in the Netherlands.
In a muddy Dutch field, the reality of a constant Christmas controversy. Here, these slow-moving, munching mechanical caterpillars are relentlessly harvesting Britain's most divisive vegetable, the Brussels sprout. In the Netherlands, the little sprout is very big business. Frederica's the third generation of her family to harvest sprouts. This year has been a tough one.
In the summer it was very dry, so we need to irrigate the sprouts, we need to give fertilizer, love to the sprouts of course. Also the costs are everything is expensive, labor, fertilizer, chemicals, everything you need for sprouts.
Britain's supermarkets will sell about 750 million sprouts over Christmas. Only half will actually be eaten. Right here is where this Brussels sprout starts its life, on a farm in the Netherlands. But now it begins its gruelling journey to you, going from field to fork. The sprouts are taken here to a factory half an hour away. It's a labyrinth of machines to sort out sprouts. The biggest go to Germany, the Dutch like the small ones, and these are the ones destined for Britain. So, these are the British Brussels sprouts. What makes these British?
What make them British? I think really because they are fine.
Not too big, not too small.
I think.
They all go through this machine. It scans sprouts for imperfections, and Jack is watching out for any bad uns.
It's just like a puzzle. You have to find the sprout what is not good, and then with this you're gonna play the colours.
The Dutch grow more sprouts than anyone else. They've even changed the taste to suit British palates that prefer sweet over bitter. It is a huge effort to tout the sprout. And despite all that, some of you still won't eat them. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Holland.